My name is Jake Baxter. It's been a year now since the world as I knew it blew up in my face. I guess that's not entirely fair. The world didn't just blow up, I blew it up myself. I destroyed it around me and walked away from the destruction. To my credit, I had help. At least 60 crooks laid the charge. All I did was light the fuse. My wife was one of these cheaters, and I took a perverse pleasure in seeing them all go down with her. Until my great awakening, I was a happy, uncomprehending husband, in love with my wife and content with our life together. Everything was going beautifully. We had been married for 5 years, had our own small apartment with good friends and neighbors I liked, great jobs and supportive families. We were making more money than we needed and saving for the future. The future turned out to be nothing like we planned. I wish I could tell you something about us or our marriage that might make sense of this story. But the truth is, I can't make sense of it myself. I married my college sweetheart. She was sweet, kind, and funny. She was loving and affectionate. She never flirted with other men. She did not dress provocatively, and I never questioned her loyalty to me. I work in a research and engineering lab that develops highly specialized electronics for NASA and the military. We jokingly call it the Geek Center. Most geeks are like that. We're very complex at work and very simple at home. What you see is what you get. There are no gimmicks because we don't know how to do them. A lot of people think geeks are teenagers. Perhaps by their standards we are. We laugh at silly jokes, quote movies and obscure works, and are fascinated by details. Whatever sophistication we possess, it is not very high in social circles. On the other hand, we know that if we lose our reputation for telling the truth, we're finished. Geeks don't lie. Our reputation is our career, and both are built on the truth. My wife, Jeannie, works in finance at a firm called Watson & Watson. They handle the financial side of large construction projects and seem to have a hand in many of the largest projects in the mid-Atlantic states. The office is downtown, and Jeannie works with a lot of surprisingly uneducated people. They know what money is, and some of them know how to program spreadsheets. But I confess that every time I talk to her coworkers, I feel like I'm back in middle school. This is a true story. Jeannie and I got 2 kittens, and they were brothers. We wanted to name them Lewis and Clark. One of her coworkers said, "That's fine, but you really should name them after someone famous." You know what I mean? They're the cool kids, and I'm the invisible one. Jeannie and her coworkers are always working angles, and if it's not written down, it doesn't mean anything. I never liked it, but I always assumed it was her job, not her values. Boy, was I wrong. Whereas geeks think individually and come together to test their ideas, financiers think collectively. They identify with the group. The only time they think as individuals is when they are taking care of number one and trying to climb the corporate ladder. I didn't like many of them, but I didn't hate them until the very end. The first unpleasant feeling I had was at the office Christmas party. It was held at the Marriott Hotel located across the street from my wife's office. Everyone mingled freely, and half the time I didn't know whether I was talking to a coworker or my spouse. The booze flowed freely, and while standing at the bar, I heard one woman say, "I'm going to have to discuss this with my husband at work before I agree to this." It was a strange statement. I wanted to turn around and see who said it, but instead I froze. A little voice in my head said, "Stop, listen, don't speak. Try to become invisible for at least a moment." "Well, everyone will be on vacation next week, but I think we'll be fine until then. You know, that's a whole week without crossing the street." Both women laughed. "You can always have a little emergency with the bill." That made them both laugh even harder. What did she mean by crossing the street? Did they really think they were going to have to go back to work in the middle of a Christmas party? I don't know what I heard, but it bothered me. I remember thinking, boy, I married the right woman. Whatever they're thinking, it doesn't sound right. Then I let myself forget about it and went back to the party. For the next 3 weeks, I didn't bring it up. Friday night, I was coming up the carpeted stairs from the basement when I heard my wife say, "Okay, I'll get right on that. Hey, what's a wife for anyway?" Then she laughed. "A wife? What the hell is that?" I rounded the corner just as Jeannie hung up the phone. "What was that?" I asked. I tried to say it without accusation. She jumped up. I surprised her. "Oh, that was Henry Thomas. It's work. I have to get into the office tomorrow and we'll be working late next week. An opportunity has come up to put together a financing package for a new apartment complex they want to build on J Street. The conversation I overheard at the Christmas party came to mind. "Sounds like a little trouble with the bill," I said. Jeannie laughed. "I don't know if I'd call it an emergency, but it's an opportunity that's too good to pass up. We've both worked hard this year. I was hoping we could relax a little this month and spend more time together." "Honey, don't be like that. You have to grab onto things like this when they come up or you'll lose them forever. I'll fix it." "What's all this talk about wife? I thought you were my wife. How many husbands have you had?" Shock flashed across her face. She didn't realize I had heard her. She tried to hide it with a smile. "Just you, silly. That's what we say in the office. We team up to work on projects, and sometimes we joke that we see our partners more often at work than at home. It's just our little joke. Everyone says that." Jeannie was dodgy to the point of condescension. She was smiling, but her hands were shaking. "Tomorrow I'll come in for a few hours to start work, and then we'll spend the rest of the weekend together." The rest of Friday night passed quietly, and on Saturday morning, Jeannie went to the office as if it were a normal workday, except for the casual attire. The rest of the weekend together didn't start until after 7 p.m. on Saturday night. Don't get me wrong. I understand the hard work and deadlines. I just don't like secrecy. And I felt like there was a lot more secrecy in my marriage than I realized. I thought a lot about secrecy that Saturday while I waited for Jeannie at home. Even though I was constantly telling her stories about work or what I heard at work, I began to realize that she never talked about her work. It was like she had two lives, one at work and one at home. I had never realized before how much she had shut that part of her life off from me. When my wife finally came home Saturday night, she went straight to the shower and I started grilling steaks. I couldn't stop thinking about that wife remark. Even if it was innocent, it made me wince. I didn't like it one bit. Two phrases from that Christmas party kept replaying in my head. One was husband at work, and the other was cross the street. Literally or figuratively. Across the street from Jeannie's office were two buildings. One was a large medical practice. The other was a Marriott hotel. It struck me that many of the people at that Christmas party seemed to know the way to that hotel well. I kept telling myself that they probably go there for lunch and place clients there. But in my bad mood, I kept envisioning a different scenario. I decided that week that I needed to get away from the lab and have lunch in my car. It just so happened that my car was parked a block away from where my wife worked, and I had a great view of the street between her office and the Marriott. What I saw, I didn't like. At about 11:45 Monday morning, just before lunch, about a half-dozen couples crossed the street and entered the Marriott. At about 12:30 p.m., I saw the same couples walking back to their offices. There were no groups of 3 or 4 women going to lunch together. Just couples. I didn't see my wife among them, but I felt uneasy. On Tuesday, I saw the same thing. Different couples, but the same behavior. I knew I couldn't go into the Marriott and watch the lobby. Too many people could recognize me, not least my wife if she saw me. I needed help. Never in my wildest dreams or nightmares did I think I would do what I did next. That same day, I hired a private investigator named Harvey Madison. I told him what I knew and what I needed to know and then gave him a picture of my Jeannie. He advised me to do the most impossible thing imaginable. He said, "Don't think about it. Just go back to your life and act normal. It may be nothing, and if it is something, you will soon find out about it." I told him I hoped I was wasting money and went back to work. I wasn't wasting money. Thursday morning, Harvey sat me down in his office to deliver the bad news. My wife walked into the lobby of the Marriott at 11:45 Wednesday morning with Henry Thomas's arm around her waist. They stopped at the counter to get a key and immediately went to the 4th floor. They did not return until 12:40. Harvey Madison had a brief and very confidential conversation with the porter. My wife and her work husband were regular visitors to the hotel. Harvey's conversation with the porter cost me $300, and Harvey warned me that it was only a down payment. I needed ironclad proof, and that meant videotaping from inside the room. I hated myself for what I was thinking, but my thoughts about my wife were quickly becoming very dark. To get what I wanted, the porter had to cooperate. Harvey had to find out which room Jeannie and her employee husband would be staying in. He then had to rent the same room just before and just after their next visit so that Harvey could set up a small video camera in it. This meant 2 room rentals and a bribe. I could afford it and paid it. I had a bad 7 days. I tried to avoid Jeannie as much as possible, but she would ask me why I was acting so weird. I just told her it was work, but I doubted I was fooling her. She wanted to make love, and I told myself that if I hadn't caught anything yet, I probably wouldn't, and we did. My heart was not engaged. My only emotions were anger and hurt. I felt like my marriage was dying, and I still had very little evidence and no explanation. I knew she was cheating, but I tried to force myself not to judge until we had video footage from the room. I had to see it to be sure. Harvey called the clerk and got a room for the following Wednesday morning and evening. I went to his office Thursday morning. I now had the proof and the heartbreak that came with it. I watched a 40-minute video of my loving wife, the center of my universe, having sex with her work husband, Henry Thomas. The world as I knew it was coming to an end. A geek's thoughts sometimes run in strange directions. I'm reminded of the old joke about the husband who comes home and discovers his wife is cheating on him. He puts a gun to her head and says, "Don't laugh, you're next." I promised myself to do things in order. They'd pay, and I'd leave. But before that, I had to leave for a few days. I couldn't be in the same house with her. I talked to my boss and arranged a vacation for the rest of the week. If anyone asks, I was needed on Wallops for the weekend. I came home, packed a bag, left a note, and headed west. I had a childhood friend, David, who lived an hour from Baltimore, and he agreed to host me for the weekend. I counted myself lucky that I didn't cross paths with Jeannie while I was home. I don't know what I would have done, but I was in no condition to act normal. I needed time to think, to plan, and most importantly, to calm down. You know what? Leaving that note was the first time I lied to my wife. I felt bad, but I needed to go, and I wasn't going to let up just yet. The trip west gave me time to think. Did I really know this woman? Was she so good at organizing her life that she could justify having 2 husbands? One thing I knew for sure was that my wife had mistaken gullibility for stupidity. I had never been stupid, and lying to a husband who trusts you completely is not a big trick. Now the days of trust were behind me. My marriage was dead, and all that was left was the funeral. As for childhood friends, they know you completely. They know who you were then, who you are now, and what you are constantly thinking about. It's impossible to hide from them. My friend read my face within 2 minutes of me walking through his door. I told him the news, and as good friends should, he was just as angry as I was. His wife, Marie, tried to calm us both down and make us think. She wasn't defending Jeannie. She just wanted me to know exactly what I wanted and not to stray into half measures. Make no mistake, you need a woman's perspective to truly understand the social contract. If I was mad at my wife and her employee husband, her focus was on all the other women who worked in that store. In her opinion, it was the women who controlled sex, and all the women there either participated in that behavior or turned a blind eye to it. She said, "Men are pigs, and it is up to women to civilize them." She then smiled at her husband, who reluctantly agreed. "I want to destroy them all. I am divorcing my wife, that lying, cheating whore. She betrayed me, and obviously not for the first time, but I want to hurt them all. I want to make her Mr. Henry Thomas sorry, and I want every crook in this office to regret every day they crossed this road to cheating." Marie tried to reason with me. "Make sure you're prepared for the consequences. There may be a reason for this that you don't know about. Maybe she will regret her action so much that she will never do it again. You loved this woman enough to marry her. Do you want to throw it all away? Think about it." I pulled out the video and they watched it with me. Henry Thomas was a paper hanger. His job involved money. Where I ran after work, he went to expensive restaurants. Henry Thomas was a softie. For 40 minutes, we watched my wife give herself to her laboring husband. It was humiliating. She smiled, even laughed, but I was dying. Henry Thomas was nothing special. He wasn't eternal. He wasn't even particularly rhythmic. Oddly enough, most of the conversation centered on work. Undressing, they talked about the current project, and dressing later, they discussed the day's schedule. Once he quickly recovered from round 1, she moved on to round 2. When the video ended, there was silence in the room. I turned to Marie and asked, "How long do I have to think about this?" She just shook her head, hugged me, and started cooking dinner. David grew up and became a lawyer, I know, but he's my friend, so I forgave him. His wife teaches middle school science. They both have amazingly analytical minds. We talked a lot that weekend, and with their help, I devised a plan. I called Harvey and told him my plans. It would cost me some money, but if I was patient, it would work out. We decided to divide my wife's office into two groups. One consisted of management and those who worked closely with Jeannie. One group had about 10 people plus their spouses. I wanted them not just burned, but incinerated. The others would feel the heat, but I wouldn't spend my life savings to burn them. Harvey set up video cameras in the offices of the executives and those they were targeting. The rest of us were videotaped, coming and going through the lobby. When I was ready to file divorce papers, I would sue the company and share what I had with each employee's spouse. I spent a lot of time that weekend wondering if I had missed the signs. There must have been signs. She never seemed unloving. She was supportive when I talked about my work. Could she really have lived two lives without guilt? Was she a sociopath? Her nervous reaction when I asked her about the wife remark on that first Friday suggested to me that she knew what was right and wrong, or at least knew that her actions could have consequences. I couldn't understand how anyone could go 2 lifetimes without having a nervous breakdown. It occurred to me over the weekend that by leaving town, I had given Jeannie and her work husband the perfect opportunity to use our house for a date night. I thought about it, got angry, and then realized it didn't matter in the slightest. I was divorcing her regardless of her actions. Just in case, I would leave her the damn bed and take whatever I wanted out of the rest. I prepared myself for the upcoming deception and drove home Sunday night. To save a few bucks, we decided not to rent any work spouses in their hotel rooms more than once. The exception was my wife and her Mr. Thomas. This kept room rental costs down, and Harvey's people were only allotted 2 hours each day. When it came to Jeannie, I wanted to quash any "it was only once" type claims. It only took 2 weeks to get everything I wanted. I hated those weeks. I know some will say, wasn't one time enough? Of course it was enough, but I wanted revenge on the whole office, on everyone who knew my wife was cheating and didn't say anything to me. And it took a little longer. Most spouses at work seem to run away once a week. Some cross the street more often, and some perhaps less often. We didn't catch them all, but enough. Jeannie and her employee husband had a every Wednesday schedule. I decided to work late, but it wasn't enough. It was too painful to stay home. I organized another emergency trip to Wallops on Thursday, but I actually stayed at a hotel near work that night. Friday night, I drove west to visit David and Marie again, and Monday night I stayed at the hotel again. Jeannie started complaining that I was ignoring her, and, at least on my part, the relationship grew cold. She had no idea how cold. For some reason, she was trying to maintain a normal relationship at home, but I wasn't helping her much, and it started to show in her general behavior. I started sleeping in the guest room and leaving the house early. I had my own deadlines at work as well. Maybe she thought our marriage was in danger or bought my excuses, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, it didn't stop her from having lunch on Wednesdays with her husband at work. What's more, their lunch breaks have gotten longer. At least 2/3 of her company's employees were cheating on their spouses, including most of the executive staff. I guess it's true what they say, the fish rots from the head. A few months later, I realized that in the 3 videos I watched, he never once mentioned me. He hadn't maligned me. She didn't mention me, complain about me, or defend me. She wore wedding rings, which angered me even more, but it was as if I didn't exist. I was simply not considered in that part of her life. There was tenderness between the two lovers, but in a strange way, there was no real intimacy. They were more than buddies, but less than lovers. I thought my marriage was over that first Wednesday when I saw my wife walk through the lobby with her arm around her working husband's waist and up to their suite. After seeing them having fun, I realized there would be no discussion, no excuses, and no cliches. I would blow up this marriage and her entire office with her. I didn't want to hear her apologies, and I didn't want to see her tears, and I certainly didn't want to hear that it was just sex. 3 dates, actually 4, would have silenced any claims that she only loved me. My lawyer prepared the legal documents, and Harvey did the rest. At 10 on Monday morning, a bailiff entered the Walker office to serve the papers to Jeannie and Henry Thomas at their desks. He then went into the CEO's office to serve the company. It seems almost ironic now, but the CEO of Walker was George Walker, and he was one of the crooks. George Walker was 67 years old and had a trophy wife who was only 29. Why would he need a 45-year-old secretary on the side? I will never understand some people. My cell phone started ringing at 10:20, so I turned it off. Once that was done, 5 Harvey operatives started handing out manila envelopes to the real spouses of everyone in the company. Some got pictures, some got videos, but all of them got detailed reports that could be used in divorce proceedings. Henry Thomas's wife received a particularly large envelope. Others simply received letters with information about what was going on at the Watson & Watson office, in case they wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk with their spouse when they got home. They all received a short note that said, "In the interest of full disclosure, you can thank Jeannie Baxter for bringing this to our attention." I wondered how many friends my cheating wife would have on Tuesday morning. The Watson & Watson company disappeared virtually overnight. My lawsuit against the company was followed by at least 20 others. Divorces spread through the office like a firestorm. Even some marriages where we never found evidence of adultery didn't survive. Management tried to fire everyone who was tainted by the scandal, only to be confronted with their own involvement in the mess. Those who were innocent left almost as quickly, hoping to preserve their own reputations. The press got wind of the scandal, and 2 weeks later there was an article about the firm that included the phrase work spouses. I wonder where they got that from. I bet it was just some weirdo husband who didn't understand how the real world works. Shortly thereafter, business went downhill, and the office closed within 2 months. The office building sat empty for almost a year. Eventually, I met with Jeannie at my attorney's office. She cried a lot. After weeks of angry messages mixed with rejections, begging, pleading, and bizarre attempts at bribery and negotiation, she finally took responsibility for her situation. She said she got caught up in the excitement and culture of high finance. I don't know what having sex with her coworker had to do with finance, but it was definitely part of the culture. The apology didn't last long, and eventually she said it was partly my fault for not discussing my problems with her. Yes, it was my fault. Bullshit. You don't have to remind your spouse not to sleep with your husband at work. You don't have to remind your spouse not to get a goddamn husband in the first place. I never understood Jeannie's cheating, and she never adequately explained it to me. All I know is that she had changed. A clear-eyed and seemingly truthful girl interested in business had turned into a two-faced and very deceptive con artist who seemed to live by the motto, "If he doesn't know, it won't hurt me." Harvey told me that they only met on Wednesdays during their lunch break. My absence from home that weekend was not used as an opportunity for them to meet. It seems she had some strange idea of a dual marriage that limited her cheating but didn't rule it out. Harvey tried to explain to me that he thought it was some kind of sick bonding ritual. There was a perverse corporate culture at Watson where team building meant having sex with coworkers. There was some kind of twisted loyalty where employees only had sex with one person, and it was usually the person they worked most closely with. He thought they were smarter and superior to everyone else. Whether it was a shared secret that led to shared risk-taking or a distorted social contract, I never realized. I wish I could say I stopped caring about it either, but I never stopped caring about my marriage to Jeannie or the circumstances that led to my divorce from her. I could have spent my life trying to understand these people, or I could have just walked away. I chose the latter. I got my revenge, but it didn't work out the way I planned. I won the lawsuits, but the company's accounts ended up empty and Henry Thomas lost almost everything in the divorce. Because of my actions, the company and Thomas were unable to pay the lawsuits against them. How's that for irony? When I divorced my wife, she lost her job and was demanding alimony. My attorney argued that her unemployment was a direct result of her infidelity that led to the divorce, and she did not get her alimony. Even the hurt spouses of cheating spouses resented me for disrupting their lives with an unpleasant truth. They seemed to blame me almost as much as they blamed their cheating spouses. It's a big city. I can live without their love, but I didn't expect this turn of events. One of the spouses surprised me more than the others. Sheila Thomas approached me in a bar one night. She was extremely attractive and should have been more than enough for any man. I was still drinking my first beer. She introduced herself, sat down next to me, and put her hand on my legs. There, she had my attention. I'm divorcing my husband, but I want revenge for more than just that. I want to tell him that I slept with his whore's husband. Will you help me do that, Mr. Baxter? How about it, Jake? Will you defile me and help me humiliate the man who fucked your wife? I wasn't sure what I thought of that word defile, but I decided I would help her, and for a long night, I did my best to accomplish just that. I told you, didn't I, that I slept in the guest room for 2 weeks before I serviced my wife, so I was supposed to have a discharge. That night, I relieved myself 5 times. I felt dehydrated and had to drink water every hour. Leaving early the next morning, Sheila said she was heading home to rub her husband's face. I reminded her that I had already rubbed my face with it earlier in the night and would really like to rub it again. She laughed and promised that she would soon. Jeannie's family was furious for a while, so I sat them down at the table and showed them the video. They cried, apologized, and cried some more. In the end, they didn't hold me responsible for the divorce, although they tried to convince me to give her a second chance. But I couldn't. There was no forgiveness in me, and I couldn't remember her asking me to forgive her. She turned my heart to stone, and it stayed that way for over a year. At some point during the divorce, as I was telling my friends at work what had happened, it occurred to me that all my skills had gone to waste when I needed to catch a cheating wife. I'm an expert in high-tech electronics, but she was caught with a sandwich eaten in a parked car, a bribe to the doorman, and miniature video cameras that can be purchased online. I also thought about how easy it was to catch them and how easily they could hide it. I overheard 2 conversations and it hit me. After that, everything was out in the open. Couples crossing the street didn't even try to hide their involvement. What arrogance! As they say in the suburbs, what will the neighbors think? I mean, people should have known. It's amazing they got away with it for so long. I began to wonder, does the world I live in bear any resemblance to the world around me? Does everyone act this way? Where I worked, anyone who claimed to be a player was single and only dated their right-hand man. Once again, I realized I was back at the table for nerds trying to figure out the cool kids. Every now and then I run into Jeannie on the streets or in stores. I don't stop to talk to her, and I don't know what she's doing. When she sees me, she looks like she wants to cry. I never look at her for long. The sight of her still breaks my heart. I turn away, and she knows better than to come near me. I'm no longer the man she married. The life I knew is gone, and I'm starting over. Like I said, I lit the fuse and blew it, but I didn't realize the shrapnel would tear my own heart to pieces.